Hi, everyone. Cassidy, can you guys hear me okay?
Yeah.
Okay, great. I just want to thank everyone for your time and your attention this afternoon. And I apologize, I am not able to be there in person. I've also been told I need to zip through things very efficiently so that we can get you back on schedule. So I'm just going to hit the high points here. And I really encourage anyone that has any questions, follow-up questions or comments to reach out to me or anybody at the Alaska Broadband office via phone or email, and we can make sure that you have that information. This is not advancing. Let's see, I apologize. There we go, I think. Is that moving for you guys? That's what I thought I had done here. That's what I. Oh, here we go. I show the slide on, there we go. Okay, now it's moving. Thank you. I apologize for the delay. Just a friendly reminder that the mission of the Alaska Broadband Office is to facilitate access to the full benefits of broadband for all Alaskans with improved quality of service and lower costs. And the Broadband Office is set up to be as lean as we can be, as efficient as we can be with staff. We have a director, myself, the deputy director, Melissa Kukesh, our tribal liaison, and Caitlin Himes, who is our administrative specialist. We are augmenting our staff with skill sets from other divisions and departments around the state, and primarily coming from the Division of Community and Regional Affairs with grant administration assistance and map and analytics and data resources. We'll also be getting assistance from the Department of Natural Resources Office of Project Management and Permitting to assist with streamlining the permitting process for broadband projects. And we will be providing funding to help augment the staffing within the Division of Mining, Land and Water, the Department of Transportation, and the Department of Environmental Conservation for those entities that adjudicate permitting, to make sure that there isn't a backlog due to a lack of staff to be able to handle permit reviews going through the process. There have been some major accomplishments over the last several months. As Cassidy was mentioning earlier, we have been working on the Alaska Digital Equity Plan. That was approved on March 14th of this year, and that makes us eligible for the Digital Equity Capacity Grant funding that I will talk about here very shortly. We have received approval from the National Telecommunications and Information Administration on what is called our initial proposal, Volume 1, which is our in-state mapping challenge process. That approval was given on March 6th, and we are in the process of going through what is called curing on our initial proposal, Volume 2 for the BEAD program, which is basically our grant program that is going to allow us to deploy the roughly $1 billion in BEAD funding that we received under that program. So I want to talk briefly about the mapping challenge. What the mapping challenge does is it allows for Alaskans to take a look at the locations that have been identified and the service levels that have been identified by the FCC under the broadband data map. And under the in-state challenge, there are a number of different challenges that can take place. I'm going to go over those as quickly as I can. But basically what's happening is at the beginning of April, we started the 30-day public review of the broadband serviceable locations. That's like an individual home or a small business, and the list of community anchor institutions. Those are like libraries, hospitals, clinics, schools, those sorts of things. We are now right here in that timeline, and on May 6th, roughly, the challenge period will officially open, where folks can go in and look at a map and identify their location and determine whether or not they believe the service level is accurate for that location. That challenge period will last for 30 days. Once that challenge period is over, the internet service providers will have 30 days to rebut any challenges that have been submitted. If an internet service provider does not agree with a challenge that has been submitted, then the Alaska Broadband Office mediates what that is and looks at the information, the evidence that's been provided by both sides, and adjudicates that and makes a determination. And so we anticipate this process being done in August. As I mentioned, there are several different types of challenges. You can only challenge the level of service at a broadband serviceable location. You cannot challenge whether or not the location is there. So unfortunately, at this point, if your location is not on the map, that is not something that can be added at this point. When it comes to community anchor institutions, you can challenge service availability and you can challenge locations. There are a couple of other different challenges that I'm unfortunately going to skip today called enforceable commitments and planned projects. Those are basically projects that are already in play because they're projects have been funded under another funding source like the Tribal Broadband Connectivity Program or the USD ReConnect program, or a planned project is an internet service provider that already has a project in play, ready to go, and that service is going to be online by June 30th of this year. There are only 4 different entities that are officially authorized to submit challenges: local governments, tribal governments, nonprofit organizations, and internet service providers. But the state of Alaska has done something different. We are required to have an online challenge portal. And in that challenge portal, we have provided for a button for somebody to click other. So if you were an individual or you represent an organization that is other than one of these 4, you may go in and click other and submit your challenge. And the Alaska Broadband Office will review that and will route it to a nonprofit organization we have entered into an agreement with, and they will officially submit their challenge for you. So we have eliminated the middle person here by you having to go to one of these 4 entities to submit for you if you don't belong to one of these 4 different types of organizations. How do you know if you need to submit a challenge? You need to determine whether or not your location is identified under the correct service level. And you need to determine whether or not your community anchor institution is on the list and whether or not it has a qualifying service, which for a community anchor institution is 1 gig symmetrical. There are 6 different types of service level challenges for a broadband serviceable location: availability, speed, latency, data cap, technology, and business service only. I'm just going to breeze through these very quickly. Availability is the broadband service identified as not offered at that location. Speed is that the actual speed of the service tier falls below the unserved or underserved thresholds. Latency is the round trip latency of the broadband service exceeding 100 milliseconds. That's the ping time it takes to get to a peering point and back. Data cap, that means that your data cap is actually below 600 megabits. Technology is that the technology indicated for that location is posted incorrectly. And then business service only, which I failed to have a slide here, is that you are in a residence, but in order to get the level of service they are advertising, you have to sign up for a business service only product. I explained what a community anchor institution is earlier, basically a school, a library, a hospital, or other type of public entity or service providing entity. There are standard community anchor institutions that the National Telecommunications and Information Administration has identified, outlined here. And then Alaska has identified specific CAIs for our state. Those are specific types of local, tribal, and state facilities. We're calling a remote job center. Those are the state remote job centers out around Alaska. Support organizations, community support organizations, shelters, washaterias, and community gathering locations. And the long form definitions of what all of these Alaska specific community anchor institutions can be found in the guidance document that is online at the portal. And I forgot to mention this, the Alaska Mapping Challenge portal link can be found on the Alaska Broadband Office website when we're ready to open that challenge. But you can get on Broadband Office website right now and click on the map of locations that is posted and the list of current community anchor institutions. We've already talked about community anchor institution service availability. I'm going to pass by these. Now I'm going to get into the Alaska Broadband Grant Program. As I said, we are in the process of working through what's called the curing process for this portion of our application with the NTIA. Our allocation under BEAD, the Broadband Equity and Access Deployment Program, is just over $1 billion. And it will be just slightly under $1 billion that gets rolled out for grants to be awarded for broadband deployment projects. We are anticipating, once we get final approval from the National Telecommunications and Information Administration, that the notice of funding opportunity will be posted at the beginning of October of this year, and the application period will last 120 days, basically to the end of January. We will then go through a review and adjudication period for 90 days, last through roughly April, and then awards will be noticed. Once those awards are noticed, it is basically an intent to award, because we have to have everything approved by the National Telecommunications and Information Administration after that, and we assume that that will take somewhere between 4 and 8 weeks for them to get approval. The grants follow these priorities. I'm sure many of you have heard these already. We have to make sure that all unserved locations are served first, then underserved, and then unserved community anchor institutions. There will be 14 minimum qualifications to apply for a grant. I won't go through all of these again because I need to move through the information very quickly. And we do not have the scoring criteria finalized with NTIA yet, but the primary criteria that NTIA has said we must have equated to 75% is the following: efficient use of BEAD funding, affordability in plans, and fair labor practices. The program requires a 25% match in what is considered to be non-high cost areas in Alaska. That is everything in gray. Everything is red is considered a high cost area, and that 25% project match is automatically waived. I'm going to keep going on here. We are in the midst of applying for the Digital Equity Capacity Grant Program right now. That is a grant directly to states and territories. We are right here today preparing our application, and actually we will go to our leadership for review at the end of this week, sometime between tomorrow and Sunday. It will be transmitted to leadership. Applications are actually due to NTIA on the 28th of May. We are anticipating a 3-month review period, and we will be moving, once we get approval from NTIA for our application, we will be doing our own in-state digital equity capacity grant program, and we will have a 4-month application period to that, and we anticipate that that is going to be taking place right around this time frame. So there's a lot going on in the sphere of broadband and grant opportunities coming up. Alaska's allocation for this first tranche of funding under the Digital Equity Capacity Grant Program is $5.6 million. There will be 2 additional tranches in 25 and 26, and we anticipate those amounts to be just over $2 million each of those 2 years. So right now we're anticipating a total of just under $10 million in funding coming to Alaska under those programs. This is the amount of capacity grant funding by state. Unfortunately, we're way down here at the bottom. The formula allocations for funding under this program are based on our total population versus the total population of the nation, and our population of covered populations versus covered populations in the entire United States. And covered populations are 8 different groups that have been identified as being uniquely underserved when it comes to digital equity. As it relates to workforce development, we are in the final phases of getting our workforce development plan approved. And I won't go over this here, but we've got several workforce development plan goals making sure that the number of Alaskans qualified to fill broadband construction and operations occupations has increased, that we have a diverse and inclusive regional broadband industry workforce, and that we are strengthening and expanding post-deployment capacity for residents to learn about and navigate education, training, and career opportunities using high-speed broadband access once it's available. And I'm not going to get into our strategies. That's all I have, because I'm sure there is more time that is needed for the other person that is presenting with broadband. This is my email information and my phone number here if anybody needs to get questions.
You hear me now? I don't know if we missed the slides, but there was lots of in there, and hopefully those will be available for everyone later. There's a lot of funding coming to Alaska for internet in the next few years. So, hi everyone, my name is Jeremiah Beckett. I think my slide will come up here. There we go. I'm from Cordova. Grew up there. I actually grew up in the Kenai Peninsula a little bit before then. Over on the Kenai side behind the airport. Did actually go to the Boys and Girls Club probably when it first opened, and love coming back to visit here. Just curious, has anyone ever heard of Roland on the River? A few of you. Okay, that's my uncle. He was a guide and owned a sports fishing store down on the Kenai. So most of my childhood pictures before I was 10 were with him, and I'll fish bigger than me every time. So it's always fun to come back. We'll see if the clicker works a little faster for me. All right, there's a disclaimer we'll just skip, but basically if you don't like what I say or disagree, don't worry, no one's committing to it besides me. So those are my data points. I've been the CEO at Cordova Telecom for the last 6 years, and that's how I got here today. I actually met Cassidy last year as we were working on a broadband opportunity for the Kachemak Bay area that we'll talk about in a little bit. I coach robotics, love Scrabble and hunting, and I'm a collector of crazy socks. That's my flair at work. So one of the reasons Cassidy asked me to come up was to talk about teleworking, remote work, digital nomads. What is that in Alaska? How do we support it? How do we do it? I think it does take 2 clicks. Yeah. So there's traditionally 3 types of teleworking. I'm assuming everyone here has teleworked at one point in time. Has anyone not ever worked from home? Okay. There's always one. So teleworking's become extremely popular since COVID. Telecommuting has always kind of been a thing, and digital nomads really started emerging about a decade ago. But if you think about it, people have been teleworking since the beginning of time. What did pirates do? They traveled around, right, and did their job. So salesmen, things like that, it's always been here. There's a short table that kind of shows the differences, but a telecommuter has a home base at the office. They're supposed to be there. Sometimes they work from home. The teleworker is going to work remotely, but they do have a set schedule. They need to be on 8 to 5 or supporting a certain group. And then the digital nomads are the ones you see on social media. They're in Spain or somewhere in Australia working odd hours because they're a programmer or some sort of job that gives them extreme flexibility. I've done all 3. They're all rewarding, all fun. It really just depends on your lifestyle, your job, and what you want to do. So in Alaska, I think telework is kind of emerging as the internet catches up with communities. I was from Cordova. Me and my wife wanted to move back, but the internet was horrible. It was through satellite. We both had white-collar jobs. We needed internet where we could actually do a video chat or send emails within a half an hour. and it just wasn't feasible when we were first in the job force. Then in, I think 2011, our town got a fiber connection up to Valdez, and all of a sudden the internet actually worked. We went there for a summer. We tested that we could do a video call and send emails. We're like, all right, now it's time to move. So communities need the internet access. They need reliable and affordable. And then Lisa mentioned something about caps. We can't have caps. If you have caps, you can't do everything you need to. So hopefully the areas you're in have reliable and affordable. COVID really helped employers see the necessity, the possibility, and the reliability of a remote workforce. So I'm going to say 10 years ago, most people said, no, thank you, just come in the office. Now they're a lot more flexible with it. You have a sick kid, you can work from home, life situations. So it's got extremely flexible since COVID. And for Alaska, it's a huge opportunity to bring our kids home. My son went down to college in lower 48. He's going into computer science. I hope eventually he's got the pedigree where he can work remote and come back to Alaska. I left in the 90s and came back 20 years later, basically, because the internet allowed me to. I was able to raise my kids in Alaska, bring my income to Alaska, my livelihood. And so it is a huge opportunity with all this broadband infrastructure to really keep our kids home or bring them home, create more economic opportunities, or even people who just want lifestyle changes. Small community, they're big into the outdoors. You can telecommute in Alaska, work remote for some big company down in the lower 48, and have all the outdoor fun, fishing, hunting that you want to here. I think it's going to be a trend we're going to notice more and more in Alaska because we are the last great state. We have the coolest stuff, the best resources, questionable on the weather depending on the day, but Alaska's awesome. And people that can come up here and work are getting more and more opportunities to do that. So this was the short story on that. And I guess I said I'd say a little bit about my story to share. So me and my wife moved back around 2010 because the internet changed in Cordova. We could connect. We actually spent our summers on Hinchinbrook Island off grid. We had our own battery bank generators, and we're able to just plug in our computers, used cellular and internet. Did I go past it? And we went to the town of Cordova in the winters for school, basically. And so we both worked for companies in the lower 48. My wife worked for Hewlett Packard. I ran a consulting business, and we never had to go down there to do our jobs. I ran a $5 million company off grid on Hinchinbrook in the middle of nowhere. And my wife was one of the top engineers for Hewlett Packard, the first person that ever let work remote. And so we're proof that anyone can come back to Alaska. You can go to really extreme places, especially now with Starlink, and literally work anywhere as long as you have power. What are the key things that bring kids here? You gotta have support from the employer. Whoever's your boss or however you're making money needs to allow it. You need to have affordable cost of living, which is probably one of our bigger challenges here. Once you get the internet, is there a place even to live? I know in our community, it's very challenging. We bring in sometimes new teachers, city staff, hospital, and if they leave within 6 months, it's probably related to housing or bad weather, one of the two. You gotta have workspace, and then you need good internet. And finally, I think Mr. Sullivan touched on it, you gotta have G service. So you need cell access. If your work can't call you and you're not accessible, you're obviously not able to get your job done. So the other reason I was asked to come here is our cooperative has been working really hard to expand internet to our regional partners. We're from Cordova. We're part of the Chugach family. A lot of villages that we support and work with. And with all the grants coming out, I saw a good opportunity to basically bring internet to places that didn't have it to kind of create those same opportunities we had in Cordova. So we've secured grants to go into all those communities there. We're currently working with Nanwallet, Port Graham, and Seldovia below Homer there to bring internet to them. We've got 25 sites across the U.S. And those fancy lines are all the new fiber optic cable going into South Central Alaska that's going to connect all these communities and create a lot more reliability on the infrastructure for those locations. I don't know how this thing works. You can just click, I'm going to click through these. So these are all the grants that we've secured in the last 6 years for Cordova, Yakutat, Chiniga, Cordova, and Pelican. And this is what's supporting those fancy lines you saw on the markup. They all have code names. We did NICE for Yakutat, new internet connections for everyone in Yakutat, CHIP for Chiniga, and then we moved on to our FISH grants, fiber internet serving homes. So technically, we've created the biggest pile of fish and chips ever with all this money. The last two, which we're working on right now, is Seldovia, which we've nicknamed Sushi. That is Seldovia Unserved Holistic Internet. Like that. It's always good for the government folks to see hundreds and hundreds of grants to give them a catchphrase they never forget. So that way, when they're talking about in the hallway, you come up on. So we got fish and sushi, and they definitely know who we are. So of those two grants, the first one here is for Nanwalek and Port Graham. We're actually going to run a submarine fiber from Seward to Homer. This will give them redundancy. So if something happened in Homer, they're still connected in Seward. We don't like single points of failure in the internet because you don't have the internet. This will be fully built out underground cables. The government also supports Dig Once. So if Homer Electric wanted to bury their lines there and avoid some of the power outages in the winter storms, we can help do that with this funding. So we can collaborate with other utilities to put things in the ground. And for these communities, it will be life-changing. Starlink works when you're not surrounded by trees or really tall mountains. When you're in places like some of these, there's probably certain sections of the village that can get service and certain that can't. We're also a strategic partner with AT&T, so we'll bring cellular service to them. So you'll be able to get mobility service down there as well. And then with Seldovia, we partnered with the tribe. And for this one, we actually applied for the tribal broadband grant. The way the government looks at it is all Alaska land's tribal, and they actually use the census area for the tribal land. So we were able to include the village and the city with the grant application and cover every home and business in the community, along with a dedicated line from Seldovia to Homer. So Seldovia will have 2 fiber connections going to it. It was great visiting there. It was kind of like a little Cordova, but slightly cooler in a different way. I loved the log competition and what they had there with the lumberjacks. But this will build it out to everywhere. Interestingly, I met a guy and we're chatting about this grant. He's from another carrier. And he said, oh, I have a cabin there. It's the last one on the road. You got to walk a trail to get to it. I'm like, I know that one because we distinctly put it on the map because it was the last house inside the tribal land barrier. He's like, I don't want the internet. I'm like, you work at a carrier? He's like, I'd have to work if they knew I had the internet. I'm like, all right, well, it'll increase your home value. I'll never sell it. The cabin's going to the kids. I'm like, okay. And then he comes back 5 minutes later. He's like, well, maybe can you just bring it, but don't tell anyone I got it. So Seldovia's, we're really optimistic about both these grants. Every grant application we've submitted have been in the top 5% in the nation. So we've been awarded everyone we asked for. And hopefully this last round here will be successful. These 3 communities will be getting internet and they'll join the rest of us in the opportunities that it brings with it. And I think with that, I think this is it. I went as fast as I could to consolidate it, 10 minutes. And that's what my off-grid infrastructure looked like back in the day. Thank you, and thank you, Cassidy. Great event.